Welcome all back to another video. SpecZ here, coming back at you with another review. October 31st, Halloween night, a most glorious time of the year. The time to dress up in frightening cool costumes. The time to puke your intestines out from an excessive consumption of delectable sweets. For some, the time of committing debauchery at corporate masquerade galas. And in this town we call home, everyone hail to the pumpkin song. We dig our way into the third season of this Netflix Monsters line. A rather gruesome, dreadful, nightmarish entry, I'd say. But you couldn't ask for anything less on the night of Samhain. Today we'll be discussing and reviewing the third season of the Monsters line based on the most well-known, or one of the most well-known serial killers in history, the Plainfield Butcher, the Ed Gein story. I've been looking forward to watching this one since it was announced, and now...
let's turn on the juice and see what shakes loose.
We explore the story of Ed Gein as depicted in this series. We dive through the crimes he's committed, from grave robbing, to building human furniture, to even...
murder!
My reviews are spoiler-filled to the brim, so if you haven't watched this and don't want spoilers,
this is your only warning.
I'd also like to note, you will be seeing some graphic images throughout this video. I don't believe in censorship, so if you're sensitive to this sort of content, I kindly advise that you hit the bricks, Dorothy. So, let's take a nice midnight monsters hop to Wisconsin, grab a milkshake, and discuss the horror to be unveiled. Let's get to it. We begin with the first episode titled Mother. The time period begins in 1944. We're seeing and meeting Ed Gein for the first time, fulfilling a farmer's duties, creeping and stalking some young dames in their undergarments without their knowledge. It's a popular pastime. Returns home to relieve himself, so to speak. Mother gives him a stern talking to. He won't be doing that again anytime soon, at least for the next 2 minutes. Eddie then welcomes these visitors with comforting spatial consent, enjoys a nice afternoon of milkshakes in Auschwitz. We're then greeted by Adeline, a girl in town much like Ed, also with an interest in the macabre. You see that? There is truly someone for everyone. Ed is just sifting through all the images and documentation Adeline brought with her, specifically of concentration camps depicting Holocaust victims who were killed and tortured during Nazi Germany, with a smile most unpleasant.
I see that sparkle in your left eye.
Ed decides to end the night with some private time with the bitch of Buchenwald. Next morning he's chopping wood, gets a visit from brother Henry, who in turn tells Ed he should break away from their mother's clutches. Eddie disagrees, says fuck that, plays a quick round of whack-a-mole.
Gotcha!
Henry gets whacked. Ed decides, I'm gonna leave now. Starts seeing illusions of Henry telling him, you done good, boy. Raindrops keep falling on my head. It's dinner time in the Gein house. Mother reminds Ed of his insignificance. It's poor Fredo all over again.
You broke my heart.
Ed heads back to the barn, comes to find his brother's corpse with no memory of whack-a-mole. Ed then panics, drags the body, lights a fire, calls for Mother to mask the crime he's committed. Officials rule his death as asphyxiation, possibly due to the fire. A damn shame indeed. With Mrs. Gein grieving over the death of Henry, Ed decides to step up and look after his mother, who then suffers a stroke just like he wanted. It was only just the two of us. We're then introduced to Ilse Koch, a German war criminal who would fashion lampshades and a few other things from the flesh of war prisoners in a concentration camp called Buchenwald. Many atrocities were committed during that time. Like I've stated before, what's terrifying is what's real, and that piece of history was and is very real. Mrs. Gein then visits a neighbor who owes some money, also coming to see if they've heard the good news about their Lord and Savior. Gets a second stroke, and that's all she wrote. Ed Gein now completely isolated with only his thoughts and imagination. An imagination that manifests itself to where he hears the voice of Mother as if she never left at all. From Mother's voice echoing, to botulism, to desecrating graves, all in all, a very good night at the Gein residence. We move ahead to episode 2, which is titled Sick as Your Secrets. We open up with Ed just moseying right along. Suddenly, a herd of concentration prisoners are stampeding their way through. Now, we would find out later on Ed was diagnosed to be schizophrenic, so nothing surprising here. We then cut to 1959, where we meet one of the greatest filmmakers in history, the master of suspense himself, Alfred Hitchcock. He's made countless films as far as the eye can see, from Dial M for Murder, The Birds, Strangers on a Train, and more relevant to this story, Psycho, an individual who was ahead of his time in my view. He's portrayed by Tom Hollander, an actor we've seen in a variety of films, shows, and plays, most notably Pirates of the Caribbean and Bohemian Rhapsody. Here, Hitchcock is learning more about Gein from Robert Bloch, the author of the novel Psycho. They discuss all the inhumane actions of Elsa Koch and how this could have been a catalyst for Ed's dismemberment and skinning hobbies. Much like I touched on with the Menendez brothers, much of this series is a dramatization, and a good portion of it has been fictionalized. That doesn't mean it can't be real. As a horror fan, I also do appreciate how graphic they can get with some of the scenes throughout the season. Horror films or series, from my perspective, are meant to unnerve you, to get under your skin, to experience the thrill of fear and horror without the consequence. If it does just that, it's doing something right. Another night of pork and beans, a visitor in the form of a moth. Now, what do you suppose the significance of that would be? The silence is reassuring. Anyway, we spend an afternoon at a couple's dance at a local skating rink with Adeline and Ed. The pair really do appear to be two peas in a pod. He's weird, she's weird, they both have similar interests and hit it off very well. Interests that especially were very rare in those days. In a way, it's beautiful and almost touching. Today, there's countless people out there who are into death to the degree of these two, if not more. So it's important to find someone with similar interests or hobbies, provided you're not actually hurting anyone to do it, of course. So, Ed invites Adeline back to his home to show off his bowl collection. Lights are off. Both are in a secluded location with no help to get to. Nothing creepy here at all. Adeline quickly gets the impression she needs to go, and rightfully does so. Ed has some choice words for mother, goes drinking, starts seeing another Nazi-induced illusion, calls it a night, gotcha, and heads back home to enjoy more garments. We're then introduced to Tony Perkins, portrayed by Joey Polari. Tony Perkins was the actor who portrayed Norman Bates in the original Psycho franchise. We get to see him really trying to understand the role, trying to embody Bates, who's based off Ed Gein. Hitchcock then takes him on a tour inside the house, which is replicated to look like Ed's home down to every conceivable detail, from shrunken heads to human furniture to preserved vulvas. A true house of horrors in every sense. Tony pukes from the sight of it, which is understandable. The cops start their investigation into what happened to the bartender Mary. As we're transported into Psycho, the iconic shower kill scene is playing and the audience is horrified and mortified as to the sight they're witnessing. One woman faints, another is going into labor, there's one guy puking. It's the response Hitchcock wanted, and a truly marvelous one at that, even if it was ahead of its time. Alas, Hitchcock made an iconic film, one that would be talked about for decades to come. Moving forward to episode 3, titled The Babysitter, we open up with a flashback showing Ed's father, George Gein, being kicked out by Augusta. He then smacks her. She takes it very well, then knocks him down like she's Ivan Drago, which is probably the most excitement she's ever felt. Augusta Gein is portrayed by Laurie Metcalf. The moment I knew the same actress who played the psychotic mother Nancy Loomis in Scream 2 was cast in this role, I knew she was going to be batshit, and I wasn't disappointed by any stretch of the imagination. We then transition into a phonogram playing some oldies, with Ed dancing away as he cleans. Just whistle while you work. The cops arrive in the nick of time to question Ed as to when he last saw Mary, denies he was anywhere else but home. We see Adeline run into Ed at the pharmacy, introduces Christine Jorgensen, a trans woman who was one of the first, if not the first, to have sex reassignment surgery. This, of course, sparks an idea with Ed to surprise Adeline with a nice evening at the cemetery where he proposes to her. I don't know how Jorgensen correlates with a proposal at a graveyard, but sure, why not? Ed doesn't want to fornicate due to his mother's belief of only having intercourse to procreate. How Christian. So Adeline has another idea of having Ed be a temporary babysitter. This goes exactly how you would expect. He babysits 2 kids for a night, performs magic tricks, some mental and psychological scarring, then to top off, brings them home. Hey, at least he's responsible. Now we know he becomes schizophrenic. Most of these throughout the season are illusions and all in his mind.
It's all in your head. It's all in your head.
We then meet Evelyn Hartley, a teenager who disappeared in 1953 and was never to be heard from again. Now, in reality, Ed Gein was accused for her disappearance, but based off the investigation conducted by authorities during that time, he was cleared of those charges if I'm not mistaken. Ed decides he's ready to be a father, brings Adeline back home. Adeline meets mother, which turns into another transition of a screening of Psycho, with Hitchcock proud of the effect this film has had during its time. We return back with Tony Perkins, who's at a crossroads with his sexuality, which was true and a real struggle for anyone in that predicament, including Tony. At this point, the audience's expectations change and evolves with time. They want films like Psycho, as opposed to the older generation of Universal monster movies like Dracula, The Invisible Man, The Wolfman, and so on. As Hitchcock says, there's no going back, and he was right. Ed returns with Evelyn strapped to a chair in what appears to be a barn or a shed. Ed is then furious he lost his babysitting job to her, decides to give the honor of this kill to dear old mother, a scene that would be reminiscent and inspire another iconic and groundbreaking horror film to come. One of the greatest of all time that would breathe new life into a new genre, the slasher. We continue this madness with episode 4 titled Green, where we resume with Ed preparing Evelyn's corpse. Adeline finally meets Mother, face to decomposing face, takes it very well, and naturally runs back home. Lo and behold, Ed is mesmerized by a green set of bra and panties. Now, Adeline, of course, has some questions, which is natural, but of course she's intrigued nonetheless. Death has always fascinated people for centuries, including myself. It's a natural part of life and human existence, so it's okay to be curious about it in that regard. We meet Bernice Warden, who works at a hardware store, certainly piques Ed's interest, invites her to lunch at the pharmacy. Eddie takes an interest in her brassiere. They both then go off to skating at the rink, then back to Bernice's home for some good old wine and pumping. Eddie then breaks the news to Mother to move in with Bernice. Mother, of course, stirs him back on track. Ed decides to end his deeds with Bernice, goes hunting.
Gotcha.
Later in the evening, two hunters get lost, find Ed performing an autopsy. He grabs a chainsaw, and well, we know how this goes. Comes back to get Adeline, shows her his work of art. I personally really like the score that plays throughout this scene. Kind of reminds me a bit of the score for Texas Chainsaw 2. Speaking of, we then cut to Texas 1959, where we're introduced to a young Tobe Hooper, another name who would become synonymous within the horror genre. Tobe, of course, has some intrusive thoughts of doing a chainsaw waltz, especially during Christmas of all times. Much like Hitchcock, Tobe is also inspired by Ed Gein and gives us one of the most iconic slasher franchises of all time, and one of the first, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We move ahead to 1973, where Tobe is on set filming the original Texas Chainsaw film, as we see him coming up with the concept behind Leatherface's 3 masks used in the film, each representing a different personality. As a fan, this would easily be my favorite episode. It's really cool to see these iconic films being made, or a depiction of these films being made. With film, you can create anything, and therein lies the beauty. It may not be everyone's cup of tea, but let those who enjoy it, enjoy it. Leatherface doing his iconic scream, Tobe with a grin from ear to ear, with a maverick spirit to push the boundaries of cinema. Really cool fan service to me, so I enjoyed it. We return back to Ed, giving chase to the two hunters, takes them off the board, begins doing the chainsaw waltz with a primal scream, then bam! Iron Butterflies, Inagata da Vida plays in the credits. Now that's a fucking ending.
Yes! Hell yeah!
We push on with episode 5 titled Ice. We spent some time with Adeline wanting to escape the clutches of a small town, taking homemaking classes to essentially conform to be a housewife by her mother. She then decides to leave Wisconsin and move to New York. He gives Ed a book on Christine Jorgensen and more bitch book involved comics, tells Ed she's not ready for sex. Plants the seed for a new addition to Ed's ever-growing list of hobbies. Ed, of course, watches a film on Christine Jorgensen, learning more about her story. Adeline comes to terms with expectations versus reality, realizing moving to New York wasn't what she expected. Meanwhile, Ed's having the time of his life, exploring the practice of necrophilia. Adeline then meets Ouija for an interview, which goes very well. She then gives the hotel manager her feedback on the conditions and heads out into the night. Ed continues his activities, has more fantasies about Elsa Koch, whom he finds to be very titillating. Adeline then returns home, disappointed and bitter. Her conversation with her mother won't exactly lighten that mood. There's nothing more exhilarating and comforting than a speech of encouragement from your loving parents. Ed finally gets his wish, but after his recent activities, his interests are now best served cold. We've reached episode 6 titled Buxom Bird, where we shed the light of the law on the sheriff's deputy who's also Bernice's son, Frank. We explore them looking for Bernice. They head to the hardware store, find a box with Ed's name. Frank and the sheriff pay a visit to Ed's house, which is littered with moths, finding all sorts of hidden surprises all throughout the property. A medieval egg hunt, if you will. Cops are enforced. Frank comes to find what remains of Bernice in the barn. Imagery like that will be embedded in his mind permanently, sadly. Gein is then taken into custody after the discovery of the horror land the cops stumbled upon. The police conduct their autopsies on the remains, from vulvas to organs to face masks. A very graphic series thus far, definitely topping Dahmer and the Menendez brothers by miles ahead. The effects and attention to detail should always be applauded, and this would be no exception. Some may be asking, who would be enjoying this type of content? The freaks like me, that's who. Anyway, Adeline gives a statement following his arrest, distancing herself from an accomplice to his plight. Ed is being interrogated by the sheriff regarding his crimes. Ed, of course, has no recollection or memory of the crimes he's accused of. Ed Gein in this series is portrayed by Charlie Hunnam, who I remember primarily from Sons of Anarchy, which was an awesome show, and he's a really great actor. From my perspective, he played it beautifully. He was deeply disturbed, had a twisted devotion to his mother. Insane would be a light way to sum up his performance. On a segue, if he ever does get cast in a future Batman film, I think he would be a phenomenal Victor Zsasz, or even Professor Pig based off this performance. Just throwing that out there. Going back, Ed agrees to take a polygraph test to which he passed with flying colors. Adeline is suddenly a freelance reporter. Frank then has Thanksgiving dinner with the sheriff and his family. He definitely will never look at a turkey the same way again. This takes us to episode 7 titled Ham Radio. It's 1958. Frank is consuming alcohol like bears crap in the woods. Considering what he witnessed, though, I don't blame him at all. He decides to put out an auction of the Gein estate, selling any and every bit of that property and contents contained within. Everyone grieves in their own way, so why not? Sheriff decides fuck that, finds it burned to a rubble. Adeline is suddenly VP of the Gein auction. Meanwhile, Ed is the professor of arts and crafts at the asylum he's incarcerated in, learns the concept of bribery from his good pal Salty, and orders up some ham radios. He sends one over to Elsa. We essentially spend our time watching Ed communicate with Koch through the ham radio throughout the episode as they relate to one another. She's then plagued with visions of a golem, decides to take her own life in the cell, which actually happened in 1967 if I remember correctly. Elsa isn't the only one to receive a ham radio, because we're then greeted with the appearance of Christine Jorgensen in this series. Much like with Koch, she's also communicating with Ed through the ham radio and learn more about each other. We then see more of Ed in a woman's suit and mask, dancing and strutting away, which segues yet again into another iconic horror thriller film. Much like Psycho and Texas Chainsaw, it would become a classic. I'm referring to The Silence of the Lambs. We visit the set of Silence of the Lambs as they're filming the scene of Ted Levine as Buffalo Bill, dancing in his lady suit to Goodbye Horses. This season, I will admit, is a bit all over the place. I've also mentioned the same for the Menendez brothers. They just weren't as cohesive as Dahmer. It just appears at times the story wasn't important, and they just threw a bunch of scenes together and called it a day. Nevertheless, Ed did have several mental health issues, especially during a time when mental health wasn't exactly a priority for society. On a personal note, I do believe your mental health should always be a priority. We conclude the Ed Gein story with the 8th and final episode titled The Godfather.
Good.
Just like we did with Dahmer, we open up the final episode with a guest appearance from another well-known serial killer. If there was ever a Mount Rushmore of killers, his face would be up there, no question. I'm of course referring to Ted Bundy, who was known for raping, desecrating, and killing young women during the 70s. Just like this series did with Gacy, Bundy is confined to this one appearance instead of his own season. But Bundy isn't the only one. We also see Jerry Brudos, the shoe fetish slayer himself. It's almost mythic at this point. Essentially, Ed Gein in this narrative inspired most of these killers, as if he's Captain America. This then becomes a trend in the episode of involving serial killers who assist law enforcement in tracking down known killers that haven't been apprehended. Case in point, visiting an older Ed Gein in the asylum, asking for his insight and assistance in capturing Ted Bundy, which did not actually happen in reality, to my knowledge. While there are similarities between Bundy and Gein, I honestly enjoyed the scene depicting him giving a psychological profile on Bundy. It may not have happened, but it's still interesting to watch. We continue to see Bundy go to work. Much like Dahmer, he also excelled in shop class. We get another appearance of another known killer, Richard Speck. I swear, at this rate, they really are trying to become the Avengers. Anyway, his assistance leads to Bundy's capture. Ed then sees what appears to be a dream of a whole circle of serial killers, including Charles Manson. Sometime later in the 80s, an older Ed Gein who's terminally ill spends his final moments, including a final visit from Adeline, some MTV. As we come to the end of his life, he's reunited with Mother, who gives him a standing ovation for the unfortunate legacy he's left behind, and finally passes. We jump ahead into the future, where a bunch of kids are messing around with Ed Gein's grave marker. One kid in particular starts seeing Norman Bates, Buffalo Bill, and Leatherface, the fictional monsters that came after the birth of the original real monster that inspired them. So in every sense, Ed Gein truly was the Godfather.
Good.
The Ed Gein story has been concluded, but definitely not forgotten. The third season of Monsters, the Ed Gein story, I felt had its moments of fan service. The story is muddled, much like the Menendez brothers, but horrifyingly grotesque with a aesthetic that makes for a rather gruesome entry in the series. There are different kind of monsters, with many waiting to be told, and will be told, I'm sure, at some point or another. To me, Dahmer had the most cohesive story. Menendez brothers was the most flashy, but Ed Gein was truly haunting. Yes, it had its issues, but all in all, a good watch, and a fitting one as we close out Halloween. With that is a wrap. Hopefully this was of interest to you. Sound off below to voice your thoughts, if any. If you'd like to see more of these, do yourself a favor, creep your way down to that subscribe button, and have a happy Halloween. Now, time for all of you scat. SpecZ will be seeing you again real soon. And always remember,
Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
Gotcha.